folks, DragonKeeper here. If you haven't already, please check out my website at BrittanyTaylorBarber.com, where I contain links to where you can purchase my own originally published fiction on Amazon.com. And now, onto the review.
He's a human. You're a mermaid.
That doesn't make us enemies.
Ooh, I really wanted to like this one, guys. I mean it, I really did. Well, to be fair, I do like it more than some other people do, but we're not going to get into the quote-unquote controversy about this movie. I'm just going to talk about the film as it is. When I was a kid growing up, my favorite Disney movie was Beauty and the Beast, and back when the remake of that movie came out, I also did my own review on that. But when I was a little kid, I'm talking like 6 years old or so, probably my favorite Disney movie was The Little Mermaid. I was really crazy about mermaids and the ocean, and everything in The Little Mermaid was really captivating me. I loved the songs, loved the story. I admit, a little bit of a crush on Ariel, even before I really comprehended what a crush was. This is a movie that, even though I kind of feel like it got, deposed as my favorite as I got older and kind of outgrew some of the elements in it, I feel like is one that's really near and dear to me. It's also one that's very near and dear to the legacy of Disney. As a lot of people know, when this movie came out in 1989, it kind of ended what was seen as a low streak for Disney, where it came out with a lot of movies that had okay but underwhelming returns. The Little Mermaid 1989 was the start of what's called the Disney Renaissance, where throughout the 90s, Disney would just put out hit after hit after hit. It was like considered the high point of Disney before the high point when they acquired Marvel and Star Wars and began to rule the world. So that being said, this movie has a lasting legacy, and it had a lot of live up to, and as you could have predicted by now with these Disney remakes, unfortunately the new version did not live up to its predecessor. I feel like there's kind of a recognizable pattern when it comes to these remakes. A lot of them have the same problems and the same virtues, and it's a little frustrating to see all these remakes come out and they have the same issues over and over again. A lot of those issues have to do with the story, and particularly changes to the source material. This movie makes a lot of changes, especially in its first half, that seem like they were just made for the sake of being different and don't really further the story and actually kind of handicap the story in certain ways. When I was in film school, I learned something very interesting about the Beauty and the Beast remake. So, I haven't double-checked, but you can double-check this if you want. I'm pretty sure the same woman is credited as screenwriter for both the original film and the remake. But the thing is, first of all, that screenwriter was severely underpaid for the first movie, and she only got, some of the money that she should have gotten, later. At the time, she made, I think $35,000 for the script of The Beauty and the Beast, which is bullshit, because that script is worth a lot more than that. That movie is brilliantly written. But second of all, when it came to the live-action remake, they brought her back as screenwriter, but said they would only pay her for changes to the original script. They would not pay her for anything that was the same. So when you know that, and you go back and look at that movie again, and you look at all the changes, especially the changes that don't add anything, like the Magic Atlas, and her mom dying of the plague, and LeFou being gay, and stuff, suddenly it all makes sense, because now you know she wasn't getting paid for just writing a script, she was getting paid for changing a script. So all the changes in there were just so the writer could try and get her money back. I don't know if that's the situation with The Little Mermaid, but I would not be surprised. Because a lot of the dialogue, the really strong dialogue that you remember from the original, is just substituted for other lines that don't hit as hard. Right away, at the start of this movie, I knew we were going to be in trouble. I looked up the director for this movie right before I did this review, and it turns out it was directed by Rob Marshall, who has directed a few musicals in the past, including Chicago and Into the Woods. And since this director has experience with directing musicals, you'd think this would be something he'd excel at. You'd think that, but when this movie starts, it seems almost reluctant to be a musical. Did you know that the first song in this movie is Part of Your World? Yeah, this big song where Ariel sings in her secret cove with all her stuff. The big I Want song is the first song in the movie. All the songs before that moment are cut. The original opens with, I think, is a really underrated song, which is Fathoms Below, which is when the sailors all sing about King Triton, and like the wonders of the deep. It's been a little while since I watched Little Mermaid. I deliberately didn't watch it before I watched the live-action remake because I didn't want to be, like, too comparing beat by beat with the original, even though that's kind of what I'm going to do anyway. But regardless, instead, the film opens with a live-action shot of boats sailing, and a bunch of sailors are gathered at the edge of the boat trying to harpoon what they think is a mermaid, but it turns out it's actually just a dolphin. No singing! I read before I saw the movie that the follow-up song, which is, I forgot what it's called, but it's where all the daughters of Triton all sing, and it leads up to Ariel's intro where they have this big concert, and when it's Ariel's time to sing, she's not there. That song is cut. And at first, when I learned that online, I didn't mind so much because that's not really anybody's favorite song. It kind of takes some thinking to even remember that song is in the film in the first place. But when you really think about it, and when I see what the movie is like without it, even though the song wasn't anything special, the scene was really good because it sets up a lot about the setting of the movie. Like, it's really elegant the way that, like, the fish jumps out of the sailor's hand and it lands in the water as it swims, and as it swims through the ocean, you see bigger and bigger views of the ocean until you start seeing the mer people, and then you see tons of them, and they all converge on Atlantica, and then they're all in this big concert, and Triton runs in and his chariot, and he uses his trident to, like, light the chandelier above, and it rains down. It's a huge crowd, a huge spectacle. We clearly see the world of the mer people, and we don't get any of that in this. There is a kind of balancing act that all the directors of all these live-action movies are trying to do, where they're trying to be different enough to stand out and have their own identity, or they're trying to be faithful to the original. We've seen films, live-action remakes, that kind of teeter between those two, but none of them have found that right balance yet, and this one hasn't either. I can kind of appreciate that the opening of this movie is trying to be different from the Little Mermaid, the original Little Mermaid. Unlike the Lion King remake, where they went shot for shot, like the same opening with the Circle of Life. But they kind of go too far and, like, make it too different. It's different in the wrong way. It doesn't make the story better, it actually makes it weaker. Because we don't ever see Atlantica in all its splendor the way we do in the original. In fact, I'm not sure in this movie if they ever name Atlantica. Instead, when we're introduced to the mer people, we just, like, it's very slapdash the way it happens, and then we only see Triton surrounded by Ariel's 6 sisters. That's 7 mer people on screen at once. That's the highest number that we get until the very end of the movie. We don't see, like, huge thronging crowds in the city and all that stuff like we do. That's just the beginning of the movie. And the movie, sadly, does not pick up until halfway through, when Ariel gets to the surface. Weirdly, a lot of the issues with this movie, and a lot of, like, the choices it makes kind of remind me of the Pixar film Luca, which came out during the pandemic, which is weird because Luca is obviously taking cues from the original Little Mermaid. So this version of Little Mermaid is taking inspiration from something that took inspiration from... I think I've gone cross-eyed. The main thing with Luca is that the underwater scenes were really underwhelming. It was darkly lit, it didn't look interesting, the world wasn't interesting, and once they got to the surface, the story got a lot of life. But here's the thing, in Luca, they're only under the water for, like, maybe 5 minutes before they get to the surface, and the majority of the action in the film is on the surface in that Italian town where there's so much life and color and character development and story and whatnot. A lot of people have commented that this movie looks underlit. A lot of the underwater shots are, like, very dark. And I do kind of get the logic behind that because, you know, this isn't the world that Ariel... I feel like it's the same reason that the underwater shots were dark and underwhelming looking in Luca, because this isn't the world that Luca wants to be in. He wants to be in the surface. So having a visual style that makes the surface look a lot more appealing makes sense in that movie. But here's the thing. Because Luca gets out of the water so quickly, it's not a huge problem. Plus, the Little Mermaid's world is supposed to be colorful and, like, appealing to look at. Even though it's not where Ariel wants to be, like... It's part of the magic of what makes the movie so special, especially since we spent half the damn movie there. The entire reason Ariel was made a redhead in the original film was because her red hair popped against the blue background of the ocean. They The animators, color artists, whatever, put a lot of effort into making the ocean look really colorful and really cool. Even the scenes that are darker, like the scene at the shipwreck with the shark, or the scene in Ursula's lair that look gloomy, it looks like a very appealing and artsy kind of gloomy. A lot of this film, like, I wish someone would just turn on a damn light bulb. This is kind of a problem with a lot of underwater scenes, especially in live action work. The ocean is dark, it's blue. It can kind of get monochrome. But here's the thing, it's a movie and it doesn't have to be. If you go back and look at the underwater scenes in not The Little Mermaid, Finding Nemo, which came out almost 20 years ago. Yes, really. The environment and the colors and everything really pop. And Pixar put a lot of effort into animating the particles floating in the water and the way the light comes down. And yes, it's all blue. The backgrounds are all blue, but the characters and the foreground and everything else is very not. And it's this magical but also dangerous world. It's weird that a movie that came out almost 20 years later isn't as good as that, especially since how is the CG not as good as Pixar was almost 20 years ago? And that goes for the designs too. A lot of people have talked about the designs of the animal characters and how much they suck. For some of the designs, I kind of get it. I knew back when this movie was first announced that they would have an uphill battle when it came to depicting Sebastian in a live action medium, because if you look at Sebastian's design in the original, he has this... It doesn't really make any sense. He has this big fleshy head and rows of human-like white teeth that crabs in real life don't have. But we buy it because he's a cartoon and he's a great character, he's an expressive. So the fact that he looks like no crab has ever looked or will ever look is fine, we don't mind. But that design would not work in live action. And so the design they do give him with the little beady crab eyes and the weird clicky mouth is it's not great. It's just they're really handicapped trying to tell the story in a live action format when it was never meant to be. The other designs are fine. Flounder, I wasn't sure about Flounder when I saw the still image, but when I saw him move in the film, I actually thought that it worked. I do think he's cute. I like fish. You didn't think a fish smiling would be cute, but I do think it is, and it helps that cute little kid voice coming out of him really helps sell that he's a cute little fish. I don't mind the design so much, but it is a little bit odd. I liked the CG animals in The Lion King because that film had kind of... First of all, I know I'm in the minority for liking those designs, but the reason I like them is because it kind of gave it this dark, gritty... Not dark, but a gritty kind of feel. It really does feel like these are cutthroat animals acting out a Shakespearean drama. With this, though, it's a lot more magical and more fairy tale-ish, and having these animals that just look like real animals it doesn't quite jibe with the tone the way the live-action stuff. Also, the CGI isn't as good as Lion King. I feel like if they just took a page from Pixar's playbook in terms of the animation and the character designs, if you put Marlin in next to that live-action character, it would look a little jarring, but I don't know, polish up the designs a little bit and maybe people would buy it. I did see the early design, the CG design for Flounder in this film before they went for the more realistic fish, and it looks nightmarish. The design in the film is actually an improvement because that early design is hellish. I would not want that in my movie. I would not want that anywhere near my toes. I feel like he would bite me. Yeah, no. Another example of a film that does underwater visuals better is a movie that it hurts me a little bit to praise. But Avatar 2. Avatar The Way of the Water really did a good job of having really appealing looking underwater scenes. Now granted, the characters in that film can't breathe underwater unlike Ariel, so they're not there for as long. But I remember the underwater visuals in that movie being really bright and appealing and well lit. And even though a lot of it is very monochrome because the Na'vi are blue, the underwater is blue, so there's a lot of blue on blue action, it was a very bright, appealing, and poppy kind of view. So it at least looked good on the big screen. And a lot of Little Mermaid doesn't have that. And I'm primarily a writer, so it seems weird to carp so long on the lighting. We're stuck in this environment for so long, and it's so unnecessarily ugly. This film, the scene when they do Under the Sea, which is Sebastian's first big number, It looks great! Like, the colors pop, the sea life looks really lively, it looks appealing, and it totally makes sense in movie for Under the Sea to be more colorful, because the Under the Sea number in the original was more colorful. But, like, you could have had all the underwater stuff be colorful and still made the Under the Sea moment especially psychedelic. It's like you intentionally kept everything monochrome so that one scene would pop with all the colors. It bugs me. Like, that scene showed us what this movie could have looked like. This movie would have been better received if the underwater scenes had looked more like that throughout. I'm being pretty negative on this film, and especially its visuals, but honestly, I don't hate everything about the way the film looked. I do like the design of the mermaids. I like how brightly, even though we don't see as much of them as we did in the original, I do like the brightly colored tails and how they all have cool patterns. I like the variety of designs in Ariel's sisters. I love the fact that they're not wearing, like, bikini tops the way they are in the original. Instead, the fins are actually kind of growing over their chest like it's part of their body. So yes, that does mean that when Ariel transforms into a human, she is completely naked. You don't see anything, but just the idea is probably gonna do it for somebody. And oh my god, Melissa McCarthy as Ursula looks amazing. Like, the scene where she first appears and all the tentacles... First of all, they do a really good job of building up her appearance and before they show her outright. This is one of the few moments where the underwater scenes actually work, is her intro, because it's so dark you can barely see anything, but she has, like, bioluminescent lights along the bottom of her tentacles. And the way they animate them, where they, like, slither in independently of her over her monologue, it looks really cool. She looks really cool. Melissa McCarthy owned this movie. A lot of the casting is very, very hit or miss. Javier Bardem, I remember thinking when Javier Bardem is cast as Triton, like, wow, he's going to be like a really scary and intimidating Triton. Javier Bardem is basically asleep in the wheel in this movie. Like, he hardly has energy. He has nowhere near the intimidating factor of the original Triton, which, like, shouldn't be possible for the guy who played Anton in No Country for Old Men, but here we are.
Oh, help me, Ariel. I am going to get through to you. And if this is the only way,
So be it.
And oh my god, I am not happy with what they did to Sebastian. Like, his design is already bad enough, but the actor is just not... I was not feeling this guy as Sebastian. Sebastian is more than a Jamaican accent, man, okay? Sebastian was the best character in the original film. I will stand by that statement. He had the biggest character arc. He had the most development. He sung the two of the biggest songs. He is the heart and soul and glue that holds this movie together. Stephen Wright, who played Sebastian in the original, he was the only guy who could play Sebastian. Nobody else could bring that same, like, heart and soul to this movie. And that is evidenced in this remake, where this new guy kind of low-key sucks. He's okay in the singing parts. Like, he can sing. Apparently this is an actor who is from Hamilton, so he can sing, no problem. But he just doesn't seem to really get the character. A lot of what Sebastian says is kind of in the same inflection, and he doesn't have the same emotional range as the original.
The king can never hear of this. We are going to forget this ever happened. You won't tell him, I won't tell him, and I will stay in one piece. You got it?
We just gonna forget this whole thing ever happened. The Sea King will never know. You won't tell him, I won't tell him. I will stay in one piece.
Sebastian in the original is a character who goes from, like, being this, like, very self-absorbed, self-important kind of guy who's only watching Ariel because Triton makes him and doesn't care about her at all, to someone who's honestly a way better father figure to Ariel than her actual father is. Because Sebastian never broke any of her stuff. I especially love the scene in the original where Sebastian decides that he is going to help Ariel after all.
my nerves are shot. This is a catastrophe. What would a father say? I'll tell you what a father'd say. He'd say he's gonna kill himself a crab. That's what a father'd say. And don't you shake your head at me, young lady. Maybe there's still time. If we could get that witch to give you back your voice, you could go home with all the normal fish and just be miserable for the rest of your life. All right. I'll try to help you find that prince. Boy, what a soft shell I'm turning out to be.
That turnaround from him only being out for himself to him actually wanting to make her happy was a really big one, and it was justified in the movie because there are a lot of small moments and choices Sebastian made earlier in the film to lead up to it, especially him accidentally spilling the beans to Trident. While the same lines are there and the scene is technically there, that turnaround is not believable at all in the live action version. This version in general seems to lack a lot of the warmth and the affection between characters that this one has. A lot of it feels very stale. A lot of it seems like the characters are just going through the motions and just kind of saying lines and not really reaching any kind of heartfelt anything. That said, a lot of people have talked about, like, the biggest talking point for this movie is Halle Bailey is Ariel. How is Halle Bailey? Halle Bailey was perfectly cast. The fact that the other characters don't have chemistry with her is 100% their fault, and the writing's fault, and the direction's fault. It is not her fault. She is the star of this movie. So they make you wait, like I said, for a long time for the first song, Part of Your World. But when she sings, bells. It's like bells. Back when they announced the casting for Halle Bailey, I knew there were absolutely two things they had to get right. One was the voice. She has to have that beautiful angelic voice. The second was the wide-eyed, bubbly wonder. She has to be the type of girl who would look and be like, wow, the world is full of magic. She had to be believable as someone who is both enamored with the surface world but also very naive about it. She is believable as that. And because they're changing so much in this movie to get their money's worth, they don't have a lot of the same scenes, they do have a lot of the same feel. Right back when I first saw her picture when they announced her casting, I'm like, I believe, yeah, she could do that. She could have, the wide-eyed, the wonder that Ariel's supposed to have, and she nails that pretty well. She also does well both of the scenes where she can talk and the scenes where she doesn't talk. And this movie does cheat a little, like the Broadway version did, by having her certain songs when she doesn't have her voice that, she's just, singing in her head, basically. The song plays while she's looking around, not talking. As I understand it, Lin-Manuel Miranda did the new songs for this movie, and most of them are pretty good because they're in places that make sense. I don't precisely remember how they go, really, but they're not bad scenes. They do convey the characters' emotions, and they are in places that make sense for the most part. I don't think they needed to give Awkwafina a song. So, I know Awkwafina is kind of a divisive actress. Some people find her funny, some people find her super annoying. I actually think that she wasn't a bad choice to play Scuttle, because Scuttle is supposed to be annoying and he is supposed to be a dumbass. And Scuttle in this movie is very much both of those things. I do actually kind of like the way Scuttle was in this movie a little bit better than Sebastian. Because first of all, Scuttle didn't have as much of a legacy to live up to as Sebastian did, because Scuttle is just kind of a comic relief character. But that said, a lot of her lines and scenes are funny, but the song they give her is insufferable. And the worst part is it's the catchiest of the new songs, and it's in the worst possible place. So, if you guys are familiar with the plot of this movie, which everyone on the planet should be, there's a scene where Ursula, realizes that her scheme is not going well, and so she, seduces Eric. She creates a human disguise named Vanessa to seduce Eric and use, magic to brainwash him into marrying her instead, so that he won't kiss Ariel. So, right after that scene, which is a really well-done scene, where Eric, hears Ariel's voice, and he goes looking for the voice, and Vanessa emerges out of the fog. It's, really eerie, atmospheric, really well done. Really, all the good scenes in this movie happen, from Under the Sea on. With the exception of Part of Your World, the singing was good. The visuals in that weren't good, but the singing was good. Right after that is where Scuttle gets her song, where she sings about having heard that Prince Eric is going to propose to someone. And the song is so annoying, and it is so not the right place for that. Because we go from this really eerie scene to the moment where Ariel sees another woman with Eric and she's heartbroken. And in between is this really upbeat song. It's like this movie's equivalent of the Guy Like You song from Hunchback of Notre Dame. This really upbeat, really catchy scene that's just thrust into the midst of this really serious movie. But at the very least, A Guy Like You, at the very very least, Quasimodo probably imagined that song and it didn't actually happen. This song actually happened, and we're all worse off for it. Bitch and moan, bitch and moan. So, like, what did I like about the movie? Well, like I said, things do pick up when she gets to the surface. And I do actually kind of like the relationship, rather, between her and Prince Eric. The actor that plays Prince Eric doesn't really have the star quality that Halle Bailey has. His singing voice, like, her voice is goddess-like. His voice is pretty good. And he just kind of has this blandness, I guess, to him. But Prince Eric in the original was a little bit bland, too. He had a lot of, like, charisma and presence, but when you really get down to it, he didn't have much of a personality other than he was just a nice guy. And he was, you know, not uptight. He was contrasted to Grimsby, who was very uptight. Eric is just not uptight. But Eric, in this movie, they made an attempt to give him a little bit more of a personality. Specifically, he has Ariel's personality. So he and Ariel are basically shown to have the same issues. Whereas Eric's parents are never mentioned in the original, Eric does have a living mother, the queen of his kingdom, who basically chides him and rides his case the same way that Trident rides Ariel's. Eric has a bit of a wanderlust. He's constantly out voyaging, and he's fascinated with the sea, and his mom wants him to stay home and not die. Because apparently the waters around the kingdom are very dangerous and ships sink, like, a lot. Plus, the reason all the sailors at the beginning were trying to harpoon a mermaid is because everybody in the city hates and fears mermaids. Again, paralleling the weird comparisons to Luca, where the townspeople in that film also hated sea people. So it's like both Ariel and Eric are weirdly dealing with the same issues in their two different kingdoms, which is an interesting idea. I don't think it's fully fleshed out, and I feel like it could have been done better, but it is a cool idea. And the scenes with Eric and Ariel bonding and falling in love and stuff, it is cute, and like, it is very believable. There's a scene like on Ariel's first night as a human where she wanders into this library where Eric has hoarded all of his shit he's collected. And he, like, shows her around all the stuff that he has, and she's like, wow, you were, like, made for me. And he, like, kind of was, because he was written to basically be a gender bend of her. But this scene is also cool because, like, he shows Ariel, like, various underwater things that she actually knows more about than him. Even though she can't talk, she's able to demonstrate, like, show him things about the stuff he's collected that he's never known. Like, he shows her, like, this sea fossil that he found. She breaks it open, which alarms him, but then he sees, like, there are these colorful, like, crystals inside that he didn't know about. She also shows him how to blow into a conch shell, which he didn't know you could do, and which he tries to do badly. And it was a cute scene. It really shows, like, yeah, these two characters, like, they do... You could buy that they'd, like, be into each other, not just because of looks or just because she wants a guy with legs or whatever, but because they're actually, like, into each other and they have the shared interests and same issues and... Yeah. There's also the scene the next day where Eric shows Ariel around town. First of all, the setting of the surface scenes have been moved from presumably what is supposed to be somewhere on the coast of Denmark to the Caribbean. Eric is the prince of a Caribbean island, so there's a lot of Caribbean folks around playing steel drums and, like, gathering plantains and whatnot. Eric kind of takes Ariel to, like, this market town, and Ariel just wanders among the stalls, and it's kind of the best scene in the movie, where she's just, like, she really does recapture the essence of the original Ariel, where she's just walking around and touching things and looking at things and getting things wrong. There's one scene I really love where a woman hands her a tropical flower, and she just takes a bite of it and walks away from the stand nonchalantly, and the flower seller is looking after her like, okay. There's a scene in the original where she and Eric dance together, but here it's like a big party where everybody at the market is there and they're all dancing around to, like, Caribbean music, and it's fun, it's a good time, and you're like, it really does, it does something new, because this is a new scene, where she does dance from the original, like I said, but here there's a lot more people involved, she gets to see a lot more, she gets to, like, really get enmeshed in the life as a human in the way that she didn't so much in the original. And this was a scene that was different, but it also spoke true, and it was a good scene. Not all of the changes are good, though, and there are a lot of changes that are not good. I already talked about the stuff in the original, but there are a lot of little plot changes and story changes here or there that really just don't... It just feels like the people who made this remake just don't really get the original. Which is crazy, because, like, this was a film designed to be accessible to children. Small children. Like tiny little me growing up in the 90s. And how could you not get it? Like, there are tons of little things I'm like, oh, that's wrong. Well, they shouldn't change that. That doesn't make any sense. Why'd you do that? So, one of the things is, Sebastian is not a composer in this movie. Yeah, he's not a core composer. He's Trident's retainer. He basically has Zazu's job in The Lion King. So, Trident was already asking Sebastian to, like, look after Ariel. He apparently wanted him to make sure that Ariel was present for this meeting between him and all the sisters, and, like, he couldn't keep up with her, so she wasn't. After that, Triton tells Sebastian that he's the one who has to watch Ariel, and Sebastian, like, is, like, aghast and, like, pearl clutching and, like, mopes and, like, grumbles to himself the way he does in the original. But he was already watching Ariel, so why is he annoyed about getting the order he was already given? In the original, it made sense that he was irritated, didn't want to do it, because he's the composer. He specifically says, like, it's not my job to chase after teenage girls. I'm a crab. A musical crab. I'm not supposed to be doing this. He has that same reaction, but it doesn't make any sense. Also, the statue that Ariel collects is not a statue of Eric. The original Grimsby presents Eric a statue of himself, like a statue of Eric, for Eric's birthday, and Eric hates it because it makes him look, like, stoic and intimidating and weird. And it's a weird thing to get for your birthday. But Flounder somehow moves the statue in Ariel's grotto, and Ariel's enamored with it because the statue of the guy she likes. Here it's just a random statue that Eric got from somewhere. It doesn't depict Eric, it just depicts some random human, so, like, the symbolism of that is lost. I could go on and on and on, but there's tons of little changes that just add up. They make the story, like, seem not as strong, and they diminish the impact that certain moments and scenes had in the original. In general, I might have said it already, but this film is very hit and miss with what works and what doesn't. Certain actors hit their marks, most of them don't, or just kind of do okay. There are a lot of good scenes, but there are even more scenes that just feel like downgrades. The climax of this movie, however, I think was very well done. After that infuriating song from Aquafina. Right from the moment where Scuttle gets her shit together and, like, sees Vanessa in the mirror and realizes that it's Ursula, and the way she rushes back, right from there, from that scene throughout the climax, the movie's really good. Other previous live-action Disney films have struggled with the climax, and with the presentation of their villains. I was very underwhelmed by Jafar and Scar and their remakes, and everyone has talked about how the climax for Aladdin remake really felt like a downgrade from the original, where you had instead of Jafar, like, turning into a snake and showing off his powers all flamboyantly, you have giant Iago chasing them, which would be kind of fun if it was Gilbert Gottfried's Iago, but it's not, it's just some bird. The climax in this was faithful to the original, but, like, kicks it up a notch. First of all, this movie downplays a lot of the wackier cartoon elements that are in the original. Like, the song Le Poisson is not there. A lot of the visuals for Under the Sea, while they are colorful and lively and poppy, and it is, like, the most energy that the film has had up to that point, it doesn't have, like, the quick, like, cuts to all the different sea creatures and stuff. He seems to sing lyrics, but you don't cut to the same imagery, so it's like, oh, what? It doesn't seem to... It seems at odds with itself. But I feel like the absence of cartoony elements in the climax is really good. Like, you don't really need all the animals and stuff attacking Vanessa the way you do in the original. The climax manages to feel really tense with just Scuttle attacking Vanessa, and then Ariel coming in and then wrestling. Like, maybe some people feel like it's a downgrade. I feel like that one was okay, because with the transmit to live action, some things have to get left behind. Unless they want to be, like, really goofy and campy, like the upcoming Barbie movie is going to be. Which... you could argue there'd be some validity in that choice, but regardless. And then when Ursula gets the trident, and then she grows really huge, and that whole climax was cool, and I kind of knew going into this film that there would be a change with this climax. So, in the original, you know how it ends. Eric, like, climbs aboard the ship, and he like steers the steering wheel and he impales Ursula, and it's a really big dramatic death. In this movie, Ariel is the one who steers the ship to impale Ursula. And that was a change that I knew about before the movie, and I thought, that makes a lot of sense. Why wasn't it Ariel who defeated Ursula in the original film? Like, Ariel is a totally, like, active protagonist. She's proactive. She, like, makes all these choices, moves the story forward, except for the climax where she becomes totally passive, and her love interest has to save the day. In terms of, like, plot structure, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Having Ariel be the one to beat her makes sense. Because she's the protagonist. Protagonists do things. They defeat bad guys. And also, it's more tense because she's got to get her way from, like, the side of the ship to the helm. She is a mermaid now and has no legs, so she has to, like, crawl her way, basically uphill, because the ship is going around the maelstrom, to get to the helm to steer this thing. Now, how does Ariel know how to steer a ship when she's only ever been on one, like, once? Shot. It's a good scene, okay? So yeah, this film is a mix of, like, things that work versus things that don't. And unfortunately, the things they don't, while a lot of them are little things, they do add up. And it comes to the conclusion, like, man, this film is just not as good as the original. And while I have yet to have seen a remake that was as good as the film it was based on, for a lot of these remakes, I was a lot more generous because they felt like they were trying to be faithful, or they were approaching the source material with something resembling love or respect, or at least in the case of The Lion King, they were trying something new. This film, I just kept saying it over and over, you just don't get it. One thing I just thought of is, like, you know how in the original Ursula, when a mermaid can't keep the contract with Ursula, which is a lot of the time, they turn into those little shriveled kelp-looking creatures. In this version, if a mermaid can't keep their end of the bargain, Ursula just kills them. Literally, her lair is littered with the skeletons of mermaids that she killed for not being able to pay the price. The scene where Ariel is grabbed at by these little weird-looking sea kelp things is still there, but they're not transformed mermaids. They're just scary little, like, kelp with hands with eyes in the palm that look kind of like they could be from Legend of Zelda, just grabbing at her. One goes for her throat. She has to, like, Ursula has to, like, call them off. And that scene, that choice is just so pointless. Why couldn't you have them be transformed mermen? Unless it's, again, related to the trying to get paid for the changed script thing I mentioned before. The transformer people in the original weren't grabbing at Ariel just to be creepy. They were trying to stop her from going in because they didn't want her to fall for Ursula's tricks the way they did. They were trying to save her. And either the director, writer, whoever of this film just didn't get that, or they just didn't care, and they're just going to change it just for the sake of changing it. So when you have a remake of a film that you don't really understand and don't appreciate, this film is what you get. And I think of other moments from other remakes that managed to, at times, improve on the source material. Like the cover, Will Smith's cover of Arabian Nights in the Aladdin remake is the highlight of the movie to me. Like, that was the perfect way to open that film. The nuances added to LeFou's character in Beauty and the Beast, I also really liked. This film, there were just too many elements in it, too many little things, too many story decisions that just didn't work. I wanted to like this movie, and there are aspects of it that I do like. But if you've seen the original, this is the first time I've said this for one of these, you could probably give this a skip. It's just too clumsy, it's too amateurish, really. It just feels like amateur hour for a lot of it. And I feel really bad because the star, Halle Bailey, is a star. Like, she's got star quality. She can make it. I hope she goes on to better projects after this. And it's a shame that her ride into Hollywood is this film, but hey, it's making a lot of money, and it's got her name out there, so hell, if her career launches from this, then at least something good came from this whole remake debacle. But, that's my review of The Little Mermaid. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the film. I hope you like my new lighting system. That makes me look all bright and pretty. I always look pretty, though. Ha. Anyway, this is DragonKeeper, and, well, hey, you know what film's coming out next weekend? Do you? Because I forgot. Oh yeah, it was Transformers Rise of the Beast. So, I will see you next weekend for that movie. Until then, take care. This is DragonKeeper, signing off.